नमस्कार अनुपम जी।
नमस्कार सर।
कैसे हो?
I'm
Nice
good.
to see
I'm good.
you.
Nice, very good.
Super,
Nice, very good.
So shall we start?
Yes, sir. Whenever you say so.
Yeah. ಇದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೇಟ್ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ? ಎಷ್ಟು ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ? Number of
ಇದ್ದಾರೆ
they're on online.
ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಓಕೆ.
A very good afternoon to you all. I welcome you to this post-lunch session of this national webinar on Gandhi and his thoughts in a changing world. This is the last plenary talk of our two-day national webinar, and rightly we have a very fantastic way of winding up this academic session, having Dr. Anupam Nagar from Porbandar. What else do you need for a seminar on Gandhi? The place means a lot to us right from childhood, when we have studied so many things regarding Mahatma Gandhi. So Professor Anupam R. Nagar will be talking about critiquing Gandhiji's Ashtang Marg in contemporary times. I will take a few minutes to introduce Dr. Anupam Nagar. I feel immensely happy, and I should also thank Professor Ranjana Harish, a very senior colleague of mine and friend, who actually was responsible to introduce Professor Nagar to me. And I'm very glad that Dr. Anupam has accepted our invitation, and I'm immensely pleased to introduce him at this juncture. Dr. Anupam R. Nagar is currently principal of Gurukul Mahila College, Porbandar. He had his schooling at Impal in Manipur and Delhi. His higher education was at Satya Sai University, Prashanti Nilayam in Andhra Pradesh. And he's also worked as an assistant professor at FEC and Kohima in Nagaland, and at Ahmedabad and Porbandar, Gujarat. He has also worked as a reader at HNG University, Pathan, and as a principal at Sri Jasani Arts and Commerce College, Rajkot, and Dr. VRG College, Porbandar, respectively, in the last 29 years of his teaching and academic pursuits. He has penned a lot of articles and research papers in journals of repute, national as well as international, and is also a creative writer. He has published 3 collections of poems, and many of his poems have appeared in both national and international anthologies. Dr. Nagar is also a recognized PhD guide and has supervised among 7 PhD theses on comparative studies, phonetics, modern poetry, translation studies, and ELT. He has authored and edited as many as 11 books and has been the editor of research journal Coach, a journal of contemporary thought, for almost a decade. And Professor Nagar is also the honorary provost of Arya Kanya Gurukul and principal of Gurukul Mahila Arts and Commerce College, which I have already talked about. He's also an honorary provost of Arya Kanya Gurukul Institute, and it's with immense pleasure, and I feel really honored to introduce you, Dr. Anupam Ji. I'm very glad that you are able to be with us, and thank you so much for being with us. And I invite you to deliver your talk titled Critiquing Gandhiji's Ashtang Marg in Contemporary Times. Dr. Anupam Nagar, please.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll share my presentation, sir. I hope so. The screen is visible, sir.
Yeah, it's visible.
Namaskar, everybody.
Namaskar.
As Vijay sir has very wonderfully introduced, I'm Anupam Nagar. I'm the principal of a college here in the land of the Mahatma, the land known as the birthplace of Mahatma Gandhi. At the very outset, I would like to extend my gratitude and respects to Ranjana Madam, for it's through Ranjana Madam that I had an opportunity of interacting with Professor Vijay Sheshadri sir. And today, I feel honored to be interacting on a very, very important subject, particularly for those who understand what Gandhi stands for, what Gandhi is all about, and how very relevant his thoughts are even today and would be for times to come. Thank you very much, Vijay Bhai. I would begin my thoughts with this presentation. As you would see, when we talk about Gandhiji, or we talk about any other leader, it's so very important to ensure that he is topically relevant. Students of literature very well remember that poem by Wallace Stevens, Sunday Morning, wherein the author is talking about the topicality of Christ. Christ is dead and gone. He was crucified 2,000 years back. But then does he have any meaning to me today? So too, we are quite often put in a position wherein we question about the appropriateness of people and ideas. And in that context, I believe in these changing times, Gandhi gives us answers that are in keeping with the spirit of India. In this very first slide, sir, you would see I've tried to adapt the Ashtanga Marg that Gautam Buddha has given to us, and how an effort is being made here to draw not merely parallels, but then to codify. For we are living in times of codification. For those familiar with ICT, know that students are very good, very adept in codifying things. And in order to make things relevant, it's so very important to critique and re-critique these thoughts so that the relevance is not forgotten. In the entire overview of Gandhiji, we find that there are two noble truths that he talks about. The two noble truths being Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara. Satyam Vada and Dharmam Chara, these are extracts from the Taittiriya Upanishad, as many of us know. And that this is the quintessence of Gandhiji, not merely as an individual, but then as a universal phenomenon, as breathing life into the rich philosophical and intellectual tradition of India. These were the two centripetal and centrifugal forces. So I would prefer to read out what I have written in these contexts, in the context of these slides, so that I don't consume much time and that I hit the nail right on its head. As the country prepares itself into celebrating 75 glorious years of independence, it would be worthwhile to know and understand that men like Gandhi, who were responsible for the creation of India, have always operated with a method that needs to be periodically critiqued and re-critiqued, keeping topical considerations in mind. In fact, a literary re-critique of Gandhiji's philosophy ends in Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara. These were value systems which were deeply embedded in the Indian religious, intellectual, and social traditions and practices. I am making a proposal today to encode Gandhian ideology as Gandhiji's Ashtanga Marg that holds the two noble truths of Satyam Vada and Dharmam Chara as the centripetal and the centrifugal forces, and incorporates right vision, that is also referred as right view, right understanding, right thought, which is also referred as right intention, right determination, right resolve, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, and right action as ruling the mind of the Mahatma in both letter and spirit at all times during his descent on earth. The two noble truths that dominated Gandhiji's life were Satyam Vada, speak the truth, and Dharmam Chara, walk on the path of righteousness. These two ancient Upanishadic pronouncements of the ancient Upanishads form the crux of Gandhian philosophy. In fact, the importance of truth and righteousness form a part of the Ashtanga Marga, the eightfold path that was given to us by Gautam Buddha. Gandhiji's vision revolved on these ideas that you would see in the slide. The concept of Satyam Vada goes hand in hand with this insistence on truth or Satya, Satyagraha, insistence on truth. The term Satyagraha, as I see it, incorporates elements of ahimsa, sadhana, and abhaya, non-violence, austerity or penance, and fearlessness. With truth, one becomes fearless. And therefore, as we would see in the coming slides, I've also tried to engage Gandhian thought with Tagorean thought as well. For it is Tagore in one of his very, very famous songs from Gitanjali. He says, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. It's only the head which walks and treads on the path of truthfulness and righteousness. Only such a head would be held high. But then the condition is that it should be fearless. Abhaya. To be receiving blows on your back, as we have witnessed in many of the movies which have been filmed on Gandhiji. It requires great courage. Abhaya. The notion of Satyam Vada goes hand in hand with the idea of righteousness, which of course is not an appropriate translation. Dharma is something much more, Dharmam Chara. It cannot be confined to an understanding of just duty or ethics or religion. It is something which has to be practiced in thought, word, and deed. achar, vyavhar, and something which is so very important in Gandhian thought is prayashchit. You make a mistake, we seek forgiveness for that mistake, and we ensure that that mistake is not repeated. It's with this first slide that I'm trying to make my opening remarks, that Gandhian thought, Gandhian philosophy revolves on these two centripetal and centrifugal forces, Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara. Moving on to codifying Gandhian thought, the first marg or the path of the eightfold path that we are discussing today, the first is Samyak Drishti. What kind of a vision did Gandhiji have? How is that vision so very relevant to today's generation? And the terms that codify Samyak Drishti, the right vision, simple living and high thinking, which goes hand in hand with the idea of dignity of labor. In fact, there is no greater example of practicing simplicity than Gandhiji in Indian history. His simplicity reflected his way of life and living. In fact, simple living and high thinking is his greatest virtue. I'm sure many of the diligent listeners would be feeling that this is something they are already familiar with. They might even get an idea that there is nothing new in which is being said. But then let me tell you, my dear friends, my dear students and fellow participants, that the ancient truths have to be retold time and again. It's old wine in new bottle. Gandhiji stands as an embodiment of that entire Indian religious, spiritual, and intellectual tradition. And therefore, we need to see him in the totality of perspective that Indian philosophy and tradition have always spoken about and have always adhered to. This is something in contemporary times that our students need to follow. The present generation, if they understand the virtue of simple living and high thinking, which many do, the numerous examples that we have, wherein students, who have gone back to the villages, have heard and seen numerous examples, particularly of students down south, who after educating themselves, they go back to the villages and work for the development of their village. That is practicing Gandhi. Simple living and high thinking. It is in thought that dignity lies in. And if we understand this first core idea of right vision, we are impelled towards Swaraj, which is self-rule, self-control. Although Swaraj meant self-rule, instead of being ruled by the technological devices that we have in contemporary times, the question that we have to ask today is, are we ruling ourselves? Are we ruling the senses, or are senses ruling us? Is our self under control, or is it out of control? Gandhiji gave this concept of Swaraj, particularly those who have read Hind Swaraj would understand this much better, that he gave us an integral idea of Swaraj, and this encompasses all spheres of life. It's not just a political term or a pseudo-political term. It's more concerned with the self. He said, at the individual level, Swaraj is vitally connected with the capacity for dispassionate self-assessment, ceaseless self-purification, and growing Swadeshi or self-reliance. What a wonderful world it would be wherein if the young generation, not merely the young generation, if everybody exercises utmost self-control, and automatically, if we are embedded with that right vision, the soul force would be directed to things which are more constructive in nature. With self-rule, we are equipped with the ability to insist on truth, the soul force, and eventually the path results in self-realization. With Samyak Drishti, I mentioned that the soul force is something which is consequent to the vision that Gandhiji had. He referred to Satyagraha as truth force or love force. And it's a process of self-purification, an attitude of mind, a form and tool of education. Gandhiji says and states, Satyagraha is a new law for the law of suffering. It is a relentless search for truth and a determination to reach truth without resorting to hatred, rancor, ill will, or animosity. It is an action-oriented search, an adherence to truth, and a non-violent fight against untruth. How relevant and how topical the thought is for contemporary times. For Gandhiji, Satyagraha is a way of life. It is the highest form of practicing truth and can only be used by those who are strict adherents of the ethical way of life. Those who practice virtues only are capable of using this. Otherwise, it just becomes a superficial tool. Gandhiji believed that self-realization was the ultimate aim of life. To him, self-realization was synonymous with God-realization. Brahmavid brahmeva bhavati. Self-realization is the process of discovering one's real nature and potential. Gandhiji believed that through love and service towards living and non-living beings, one could attain self-realization. This vision goes hand in hand, with the very first line of that very famous poem by Rabindranath Tagore, which is sung as a prayer in many institutions and organizations all over the world, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. That vision, which is without fear, a state of mind, the mind of the Satyagrahi, which is fearless and stands tall against all forms of obstructions, enforcements, and oppression. Let's move to the second concept which goes hand in hand with Gandhiji's Ashtanga Marg. The three terms: peace, patience, and perseverance. Sankalp, right determination, which is so very important. If a resolve is made, many of us know and remember that in the Upanishadic times, in the times of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and even earlier perhaps, the students, would take a resolve by taking a little water in their palms every day. A resolve was made with purity of thought word and deed, and that resolve would eventually be executed. With right vision, we get the ability to have the right form of determination, the right sankalp. Determination again is not a very good equivalent, because sankalp it transcends the mental horizons as well. It is something of the spirit. And with that, imbued with that right determination, we have peace. The most fundamental principle of Gandhian philosophy is ahimsa, non-violence, which is the law of love, life, and creation, as opposed to himsa, violence, the cause of hatred, death, and destruction. Somewhere, there's a lot of violence being practiced at the mental level. And therefore, we have to place the contraries before us and understand that one can have the right form of determination only when one is at peace, one is patient. And if patience, Gandhiji said, is worth anything, it must endure to the end of time. And a living faith will last in the midst of the blackest storm. The night is dark, but then there is a beautiful dawn awaiting us. What leads us through the storm, what would lead one to the darkness, is the virtue of patience. And that is something that the present generation needs to look into. Be patient. Rome was not built in a day. Gandhiji was not a very good advocate. In fact, he never advocated fast food, which is the love of the present generation. There is the concept of Shuddha Ahar that he also talks about. The value systems there again come into practice. The thought process when we are sowing the seed, how it nurtures. The kind of thought process we have when we harvest it. The kind of thought process we have when we purchase it from the market. And eventually when we consume it. The right form of determination has this has this virtue of patience and perseverance. With Gandhiji's peaceful protest came seemingly insurmountable challenges. But then he was such a perseverant man. With his perseverance to fight to the end. The mantra that he had, the 4 F's of life: follow the master, fight the devil, fight to the end, and finish the game. He ensured that he overcame all the difficulties and eventually succeeded in freeing India from her shackles of slavery. In fact, Gandhiji's perseverance can be seen, is evident very early in his life. That would take us to South Africa in 1893. Gandhiji went to South Africa to do some legal work. And South Africa, as we know, was under British control. Almost immediately, he was abused because he was an Indian who claimed his rights as a British subject. He saw that all Indians suffered from discrimination. His law assignment was for 1 year, but he stayed in South Africa for 21 years to work for Indian rights. Quote unquote Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand. By staying in South Africa to advocate for Indian civil rights, Gandhiji showed his capacities to stick with a task until its completion. That's what perseverance is all about. To put it in Tagorean terms, where knowledge is free, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free. And when we are referring to determination, do permit me to add that real knowledge transcends boundary. It's transcontinental in nature. And therefore, we do not make any difference between South Africa and India. For him, the universe was the stage. And that virtues, irrespective of time and space, they had to be practiced. And one finds this very early in his life. Let's now move on to the third, Samyak, walk or watch. Right vision, right determination, right speech, which is so very important in contemporary times. Gandhiji as the Tathagat. It is the speech. It is the oral tradition that we all understand and remember. Our parents and the parents before them, our forefathers, all that which has got disseminated since times immemorial finds much substance in the oral tradition. Wherein speech, every word that one utters becomes a Ved Vakya, every paragraph an Upanishad, and perhaps all the Puranas put together, the entire speech system that one has codified. Gandhiji as the Tathagat laid a lot of importance to speech. Let me quote here in one of his writings, he says, "Here is a mantra, a short one that I give to you. You may imprint it in your hearts and let every breath of yours give expression to it. The mantra is do or die. We shall either free India or die in the attempt. We shall not live to see the perpetuation of our slavery. Every true congressman or woman will join the struggle with inflexible determination not to remain alive to see the country bondage and in slavery. Do or die." What a powerful mantra, which is consequent to right speech, uttering the right word at the right point of time. And as the supreme Tathagat, you find that every speech of Gandhiji was embedded with truth. It had utility value. It was for a definite purpose. And it was full of emotive content. These three together codifies the right speech of Gandhiji, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. The world of Gandhiji as the Tathagat was a unified world. There were no narrow boundaries. There were no narrow domestic walls. In fact, it would be quite appropriate to say that he actually practiced the mantra of Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. He didn't say Bharat Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. He didn't say America. He didn't say England. It was Loka. That perspective is so very important in contemporary times. Having as the backdrop, the entire cosmos, as it were. There are worlds and worlds, there are myriads of worlds in this cosmos. We do not know about it. But then wherever we are, whether it's the macrocosm or the microcosm, we have to ensure that our speech has these three very important constituent elements. And if our speech has these three constituent elements, ours would be a world which would be unified, and that one would not look for divisions, rather one would look for unification. Moving to the fourth, Samyak Jivan. The right livelihood. The fourth, right vision, right determination, right speech, and right livelihood. I think this is a very, very important code for all of us in the post-independence, for all those, and many of those who have not seen Gandhiji, should see the kind of lifestyle he had. Although he lived a very simple life, there was so much of nobility in his life. The four terms that codify the right form of livelihood are nobility, abstinence, avoidance of wrong livelihood, and a practicing vegetarian. Nobility in terms of being a social worker at heart. He was working, as I said earlier, in South Africa when he felt he should return to India to work for his own nation's freedom and welfare. But then there was no love lost. As I said, that there were no narrow domestic walls that encapsulated Gandhian thought or philosophy. In fact, his nobility transcended countries, transcended nations. And that form of livelihood, from the mantra of simple living and high thinking, think globally and act locally, we come to the second important code, which is abstinence. Abstinence is avoidance of wrong livelihood. If I'm practicing ahimsa in thought, word, and deed, I should be practically practicing it in my everyday habits. It is not something which is to be done at a single point of time and then we forget about it. He says a votary of ahimsa must cultivate the habit of unremitting toil, working hard. As Vivekananda would say, change of work is rest. Hard work goes on. When one work is over, when we are through with one task, another begins. And the period in between is what we could define as rest. Sleepless vigilance and ceaseless self-control. Gandhiji's feats of self-control extended beyond fasting. Towards the later stages of his life, Gandhiji practiced brahmacharya. The self-discipline of Gandhiji included a whole trajectory of virtues as self-restraint, self-purification, self-cultivation, and self-growth. In fact, this is the hallmark of Gandhiji's pedagogy of transformation of character. This also happens to be a core idea in his Naitalim that he talks about. For information is not the goal of education, it's transformation. And transformation is only possible when we stop acting like animals and act like human beings. That is what differentiates a man from a beast. A beast does not have that knowledge of abstaining himself and adhering to the laws of nature. On the contrary, man is given that ability to think and think through that there are do's and don'ts of the societies which have to be practiced, and therefore a right livelihood can only be executed when we avoid the other contrary, the wrong livelihood, which means that we have to be respecting nature. In another context, he goes on to say that every creature in this world has the right to live. The same soul or the Atma is in each and every creature, be it an insect or a butterfly, in this entire cosmos. Everybody has the right to live. And that consuming vegetarian food is not just again confined to eating vegetables, or as some humorously say, eating grass. It requires a lot of courage and wisdom to practice. In fact, this would be a good occasion to remember one of the greatest of people who influenced Mahatma Gandhi himself, Henry David Thoreau. The idea of civil disobedience that Gandhiji got was from Henry David Thoreau. And he, in fact, had read the Bhagavad Gita. It is said that when he was exposed to the Bhagavad Gita, Thoreau was virtually dancing. He renounced and went back to Walden. He renounced all his worldly means and practices and went to Walden Pond in Massachusetts, and practiced the kind of life which is advocated in the Bhagavad Gita. This is where you find that there are a lot of parallels which could be drawn between Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi. For many students of literature know that we had Srinivas Iyengar, who mentioned on an occasion that Gitanjali is half a prayer from below and half a response from above. Gitanjali, in fact, is recontextualized, is recritiqued Bhagavad Gita. And that is the parallel that you find in this code of right livelihood, where words come out from the depth of truth. For those who practice nobility, those who understand what abstinence is all about, those who do not indulge in living and leading a wrong form of life and practice the real form of respecting life in all its forms, such souls, such men of nobility lead the right kind of life. And for such people, words would come out from the depth of truth. From right livelihood, we move to the fifth Ashtanga Marg, Samyak Vyayam, right effort. Right effort in terms of, as you would see here, generating the Kushal or Kushal state, Akushal, the Pancha Nivarana, the Indriya, Samvara, all these terminologies that are referred to in the writings of Gandhiji. You find that he does not agree with the Mahayana school of Buddhism, which talks about the state of nirvana, without the physical state. The Mahayana school of Buddhism goes on to say that it's necessary to leave the body to attain nirvana. But then Gandhiji does not agree. In fact, one needs to be physically fit in order to have a fit mind and a fit soul at that. In fact, again, Tagore used to say that it is only in a healthy body that a healthy soul resides. There was a lot of emphasis that Gandhiji laid upon the right kind of effort at the physical level, the remedies that were practiced by himself, and how physical ailments create sensual doubts about the path, the right vision that we have, how it puts us in a state of restlessness, how it makes us drowsy, how there is the generation of ill will, all are consequent to an unhealthy state, an unhealthy physical state. And therefore, physical fitness is something that we need to strive towards and strive at that in a continuous and a ceaseless manner. As Tagore rightly says, where tireless striving stretches its arms to its perfection. Tireless striving. This is a boon that the Almighty has conferred on us. And therefore, every day of my life, I should ensure that I work towards purifying myself, keeping it fit, so that my spirit in turn is kept at peace. For that, whatever efforts have to be made, need to be made, and one shouldn't be compromising on that. And that's where the Gandhian code of being uncompromising in nature, so far as physical fitness is concerned, for it is subsequent and consequent to a wholesome state at the physical, mental, and spiritual levels, which goes on to remove all the hindrances, the 5 hindrances that we just discussed about. Moving on to the 6th, Samyak Smriti, the right mind. You would find that there is an entire thought process which is to be noted, from right vision to right mind here, Samyak Smriti. And here I would want to begin with what I have written below. With a clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. With a clear stream of reason, the right mind. There would be many who would question. There would be many who would wonder that some of the situations and the circumstances under which Gandhiji lived and operated, and whether the decisions that were made were correct or not. There's much debate on that. But then, leaving aside that debate, what one can definitely take from Gandhiji is that he had the right mindfulness, for he operated on 4 domains. Yogic practice, as you would see the body, we noted that in Samyak Vyayam. To see within, the kingdom of heaven is within you, as Christ would say. Real energy is not without, it is within the self. And that's how such a frail man managed to shake the entire British Empire. Kaya Anupasana, the feelings. This, of course, goes hand in hand with this idea of ahimsa. He identified himself with this entire creation. The attainment of self-purification was in line with the teaching of Gautam Buddha, ahimsa. I'll quote Gandhiji, "A perfect vision of truth can only follow a complete realization of ahimsa. Identification with everything that lives is impossible without self-purification. God can never be realized by one who is not pure of heart." Yuan sees that how influenced he was by the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see the kingdom of heaven. As Christ himself had said, self-purification. The body needs to be purified, the mind needs to be purified. The exercises, Chittanupasana, associated with the mind. And in that context, as we are talking about topicality and the relevance of Gandhiji in contemporary times, we all know about the three monkeys that epimetize the idea of speak no evil, hear no evil, and see no evil. In contemporary times, we just need one monkey. We don't need three. We need a monkey with his hands on his head. Think no evil, and you would not speak. Think no evil, and you would not see. Think no evil, and you would not hear. The changes that have to be brought about is at a mental level. Those were relevant then. And as we re-critique and critique and perhaps keep on engaging ourselves with the idea of Gandhiji, one would note that the right kind of mind is one that engages at the physical, the mental, and the emotional, and of course, with the entire phenomena, as you would see, impermanent, suffering, and without self. The mind, coming back to the mind, the impartial attitude, objectification, to know that I'm not the doer. Even at this particular point of time, a true Gandhian would not have the sense that he is the doer. There is a higher agency which is making him do, which is making him speak. And in that context, Gandhiji said that this impartial attitude in an unconditioned mind is regarded as the most conducive condition to receive a teaching. And Gandhiji said, these are wonderful lines. You can chain me, you can torture me, you can even destroy this body, but you will never imprison my mind. And the phenomena that we are talking about, the impermanent suffering and without self. And I was listening to the YouTube video which has been uploaded, and I noted somebody made a mention at that during perhaps the inaugural session. Gandhiji said, the earth has enough resources for our need, but not for our greed. The statement depicts his concern for the natural order, our environment. Gandhiji had visualized the problems of large-scale industrialization, massive urbanization, unemployment, and destruction of environment. He had warned us of the dangers of that the planet is facing today. And that is an understanding that goes in hand in hand with codifying Samyak Smriti, the right mind or right mindfulness. Coming to the last two, Samyak Dhyan, the seventh code in Gandhiji's philosophy is the right form of concentration one needs to have. There might be a repetition here, but in terms of codification, we need to put it selectively. Samadha, which of course, if you go to the etymology, to collect or bring together a unification of mind. And Gandhiji did precisely this. The unification of all religions. The essence is the same. There would be forms of light. There would be the bulb, there would be the tube light, there would be the chandelier, but then the essence is the same. There would be black cows, there would be brown cows, there would be yellow cows, there would be all spotted cows, but in the essence, the milk is white in color. Gandhiji tried in his mind to unify the religions, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, the Sermon on the Mount, the light of Asia, and of course, the concept of renunciation that we have in the Bhagavad Gita. He found it to be one of the greatest, which had a great impact on him. And that sense of ekagrata, the single pointedness of mind. If one is adept in this art of having the right form of concentration to go, the engagement that he had to do eventually, of course, works out in the right form of thought and action. But the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. The right form of concentration, the submission of the mind to forces which are higher than us, to understand that the mind is just an aspect of that consciousness, to submit Atma Nivedanam. The right form of concentration also acknowledges, the Navada form of bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pad Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma Nivedanam. The sense of total surrender. The right form of concentration would be available to those who surrender and surrender in totality. You either pray to the Almighty or you don't. There is no Madhya Marg here. The right form of concentration leads to the right form of thought and action. And finally, which sums up the entire codification process of Gandhiji's Ashtanga Marga is Samyak Karma. The 3 A's that we have in terms of karma, which again was from various religions, Jainism in particular, Ahimsa, Asteya, and Aparigraha. That is the state of freedom in which our nation leaders wanted our country to awake. Why should we have laws for prohibition? This should come from within. Everybody in this cosmos has the right to live, practicing ahimsa in thought, word, and deed. Not taking what does not belong to us, abstaining from stealing. Aparigraha, not indulging in misconduct, abstaining from misconduct. What does not belong to me is not mine. These are very simple terms, but then they carry an entire philosophy. That is the heaven of freedom that Gandhiji had visualized. So the final question is, what can be adapted? There's much that can be adapted there's much which can be practiced. As those who understand what Gandhiji stands for, who understand that when the world today is acknowledging what Gandhiji had to say, which stands as a testimony to the rich intellectual, religious and spiritual tradition of India, he embodies not as just an individual, but then as a universal philosopher. This is something that I'm sure all of us could easily adapt, having a healthy and vegetarian diet, positive and loving thoughts, the bhava that we have, eating and sleeping on time. You find that with the advent of technology, our friends, our students have forgotten that there is a time for everything. Ahimsa on the wheels, practicing ahimsa on the wheels, that is making it a little topical. And there are many who are doing it, caring for Mother Earth, the ecosystem, practicing yoga. If I'm doing this, I'm a Gandhian. Whether I call myself a Gandhian or not does not really matter. You find that the philosophy of Sthita Prajna that we have in the Bhagavad Gita, what Aristotle went on to refer as the golden mean, is something that we could practice. Swadhyaya, Trikarna Shuddhi, thought, word, and deed. This is education in human values. Today, there is much talk going on in education in human values. And I'm sure this is something that one can easily adapt. And for those who are researchers, this is the Maha Mantra that one could definitely take from Gandhiji, that all that, there was much of inspiration that he had, right from Harishchandra to Lord Ram. There is much that he was influenced by. But then at the end of it, the execution was his and his alone. There is no denying that we need to be inspired and motivated. But then when it comes to research, when it comes to doing work, and when you claim that it is yours, there should be zero plagiarism. And if you're practicing this, we are practicing truth. Thank you very much. Namaste. Namaskar, sir.
Amazing talk about ways to keep the mind and body under control. And I will not take much time here because we have the valedictory coming up. So I would give more time for the participants to seek clarifications, answers from Dr. Anupam, and you can respond to his talk by asking whatever questions you have in mind. So participants, please go ahead and you can ask questions to Dr. Anupam. You have some questions in the box?
Yeah, I can see that questions, sir.
Yeah.
Very good presentation by you. I would like to ask one question. Please elaborate Sthit Prajna little more.
Yes,
The
Sthita
condition of
Prajna,
Sthit Prajna.
yes, Sthita Prajna is a state of mind that maintains equipoise. There is an equilibrium. A state of mind which is unaffected by the blessings or the blows of fate. And that equanimity is practiced. There is a period of mourning. You would all remember in one of the instances in Shakespeare's Hamlet, you find that Hamlet is mourning the loss of his father beyond the defined period. There is a period of mourning, but then when it extends, it becomes unusual. And that balance is so very essential. Equipoise, mental equipoise, to be unaffected by the blessings and blows of fate. To understand that life and birth are the two happenings of life, and they are bound to happen. We should mourn and grieve for the loss, but then not beyond a point. For the cycle of life has to go on and go on ad infinitum.
Thank you, sir. Very nicely you described about the balance condition. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Namaste, madam.
I think there's another question, Dr. Nirupam. This is from Mukta. What are your remarks on the book Great Soul, Mahatma Gandhi and His Struggle with India by Joseph? What is it? I'm not able to read from this distance.
But then I'll seek your pardon, sir. I've not read this book. I'm not in position to comment on that. But then there is something, sir, on be good, do good, and be good, do good, see good, think good. That's the way to God. I think it's put very simplistically, but then this is something which could definitely be practiced. Goodness. So there are occasions. In order to, in keeping with the level of the students, you have to define Gandhiji. Gandhiji, so the very little G, Dr. Meena, stands for goodness. He is an epitome of goodness. You find that in Gandhiji, there is nothing evil. G stands for goodness. It's a virtue. In fact, Aristotle called it the highest good. So if we are practicing goodness, there is much in the name of Gandhiji itself. You could see, all the letter A, you could say, that stands for ahimsa, aste and aparigraha. And you might find that for Gandhiji, the center was always the nation. The country was right at the center, as in his name, GAN, nationality. For him, he was living and breathing India. He felt India. GAN, there was an essential divinity which constitutes, his self. He was humility personified, H, and an outstanding individual that the world acknowledges today. Thank you. Namaskar.
Anupamji, I have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
How would you respond to persons like say K.T. Mahadevan referring to Gandhiji as Dvija, the twice born?
I'm afraid we don't know the context in which it might have been said, sir. But then I would always appreciate and believe that we need to be very optimistic, as Gandhiji himself was. There would be words and thoughts which would be construed and they would be constructed and deconstructed. But then we need to take the best out of everybody. And as practicing Gandhians, if we can take any bit of Gandhiji and make it a part and parcel of our very life system, I think we would be rendering a small iota of tribute to the great soul.
So removing the two monkeys and having one monkey with the
thing.
Is it? Yeah, it's a nice way of critiquing and thinking about the thought processes that are very much relevant today. It's a wonderful, image that you shared with us. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much, Vijay. It's such a big honor, and I'm so thankful that you gave me such a patient hearing. Thank you very, very much. And may I extend a warm welcome to you to Porbandar, the land of the Mahatma. Please do, honor us sometime whenever you happen to be in Gujarat.
Yeah, will do.
Thank you. Namaskar.
If there are no questions from the participants, I think we can end this session. Are there any questions? Please, please raise your hand or. No, there are no questions.
Okay.
So let's conclude this session, and thank you so much, Anupam ji, for being with us. It was wonderful meeting you virtually, and
Thank you very much.
hope we'll once the COVID-19 pandemic, just goes down as we expect, which is what we all want, so that we can meet in person and we can exchange our ideas. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
being with us
Thank
and
you.
sharing
Thank you
your
very
thoughts.
much.
Thank you so much.
Vande Mataram. Namaskar.
4:30 4:15
So I request
participants.
all the participants, and I request you, Anupam ji, if you are free, if you are free, please do join us for the valedictory. We'll
Sure.
start at 4:15 and we'll wind up by, say, 30 minutes or 20 minutes.
Coffee.
We'll be happy if you could join us.
Sure.
So I request all the participants to be back by 4:15 for the valedictory. Thank you so much.
Image out Professor.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Namaste,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Namaste, sir. Namaste, namaste.
Okay, sir, with your permission.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Please go ahead, sir. Yes, sir.
Everybody, sir.
Audio is a problem idea nodi. Check mabudi.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸರ್ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you all back again after the tea break for this valedictory function. At the outset, I would welcome Professor R. Shivappa, the registrar of this university, who has supported our seminar and has encouraged all such academic activities with fantastic administration assistance and help. I welcome you, sir, to this valedictory function.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, we are not able to see you.
ಸರ್
ಸರ್ ನೀವು ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್, ಈಗ
ಕಾಣ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ.
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಅವರು ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ರು ಅಂತ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ.
ಈಗ ನೋಡಿ ಸರ್.
ಈಗ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸರ್.
ಎಸ್ ಸರ್.
I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir, to this valedictory function. I will briefly introduce Professor R. Shivappa. He is a professor of social work in our university, and he is currently the registrar of our university, and he has encouraged us, and he has supported us, and he has given all kinds of administrative assistance and guidance in organizing this webinar. And I welcome you, sir, again, and I request you to deliver the valedictory address. And on behalf of each one present here, as well as each one present connected with us virtually online, I welcome you, sir, and I request you to deliver the valedictory address.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. A very good evening to all. At the outset, I feel privileged, honored, and delighted to deliver the valedictory address of the national webinar on Gandhi and his thoughts in a changing world, organized by the Center for Canadian Studies and Center for Gandhian Studies of the University of Mysore, with the financial support of Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute, New Delhi, and Ministry of Education, Government of India. For generations, without doubt, Gandhi, the man, and his works have withstood the test of time. From the keynote to the 7 plenary talks, I can gather from the brochure and the abstracts that the webinar has touched upon crucial issues and aspects that are topical vice versa Gandhiji. Hence, I can say without any doubt that the webinar has attempted successfully to take a relook and remember Gandhi, the man, and the relevance of his thoughts and works to the present and epoch. The talks of the webinar have focused through Gandhi on vital issues related to society, environment, education, and politics. This, I am sure that it has enabled to place the relevance and importance of Gandhi, the man, and his thoughts, vice versa, cultural spaces to rethink and change the traditional policies and practices in the world of academia. I hope that the researchers, students, and teachers are benefited from the deliberations of the past 2 days of this national webinar. I, along with you, hope that the current generation and society will take the teachings and ideas of Gandhiji seriously in order to create a safe and healthy world for human beings to live happily and peacefully. I congratulate, first of all, I congratulate Professor Vijay Sheshadri, the key organizer of this webinar, and the coordinator of Center for Canadian Studies. And also, I congratulate Professor M.S. Shekhar, who is basically a poet, a very sensible poet of the current times, who is also the co-organizer of this wonderful webinar, which is very meaningful. And Professor M.S. Shekhar is also heading the Center for Gandhian Studies in the University of Mysore. And it is a very important event of this nature when the whole world is, under the pressure and also under the, reeling impact of COVID-19. I also congratulate the resource persons, all the resource persons who have participated in this wonderful seminar, very meaningful seminar, and also all the participants of this webinar for making this webinar a grand success. So I thank on behalf of the university. I once again congratulate our Vijay Sheshadri and also Professor M.S. Shekhar and all his team members who have done an excellent job. And always Professor M.S. Shekhar is instrumental in organizing very thoughtful, thought-provoking seminars and webinars, and especially from among the key people, they must definitely. I'm sure that they have delivered wonderful, insightful thoughts to think about it. It has really made a great impact on the University of Mysore. So once again, I thank all the participants and also resource persons, organizers on behalf of the university. I wish everybody would follow Gandhian steps, though they are a little slow, and definitely they will have a greater, deeper impact on human lives. Once any human being, if he or she achieves success in his or her career, so they may be very successful in materialistic way, but once if you try to internalize the intrinsic values and the intrinsic things which Gandhi suggested are going to be time immemorial. I think they live until this earth lives. Gandhian thoughts are like that because it's a motherly, sensitive things. Very motherly, very caring, very sensitive, human to the core actually. So he has experimented with all his, extremes. Gandhi ultimately realized, and he suggested the world, he suggested the humankind. That's why entire world was mourning when Gandhi was assassinated in India. And still we are unable to digest his assassination and his killing. And entire world, including UNDP, and world level organizations, all the countries have shown respect when Gandhi was assassinated, and his mankind and his values are going to be eternal, and they will live long. So we need to learn a lot of things from his teachings, preachings. So I'm extremely happy personally. I'm extremely happy that these organizations have conducted this one, and this is a very timely one. I think we should repeat to pass on our responsibility to the next generations, next learners. And that's our sole responsibility we need to do. And let us, continue on the Gandhian path in following whatever is possible at our end. So once again, thank you very much. I wish you all the best, and take care during this COVID situation. I think many elders are getting affected with this COVID thing. I think I request all the participants, you disseminate this information to take care of your health and also your neighbors, your families, and suggest to your friends to take care of their health. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Sheshadri sir, Professor M.S. Shekhar sir.
Thank you so much for joining us. Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for the valedictory address and joining us online. I know it's 31st March and it's a very busy day for you, and it would be definitely a long day. We understand that, and in spite of that, you have taken your time out for us, and we are very happy that you are with us. And thank you so much, sir, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's time for the concluding remarks of this conference. And I, along with Professor Shekhar, would like to share the experiences of the past 2 days. It was a wonderful event as far as we both are concerned, and I'm sure the others are also, the the others also will endorse what I have said, because that's the kind of feedback I have got. And so it is time that we should thank all those people who were involved in this wonderful event, Gandhi and his thoughts in a changing world, for the past 2 days, that is 30th and 31st March 2021. All good things must come to an end, and it's time to draw the curtains down to this wonderful national webinar on Gandhi and his thoughts in a changing world. We hope the deliberations of the past 2 days has provided enough food for thought to the participants of this national webinar. I take this opportunity to profusely thank people who were responsible to make this webinar a very successful one. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor G. Hemant Kumar, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University of Mysore, for encouraging and supporting this event. The Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute for providing and sponsoring, for providing support and financial support and sponsoring this event. Professor R. Shivappa, the Registrar, and the various offices of the University of Mysore for providing administrative assistance and help to run this event smoothly. Professor Shekhar, the Director of Gandhi Bhavan, and his administrative staff for strongly supporting this venture. Special mention should be made of the staff, the teaching as well as non-teaching of Gandhi Bhavan. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Suresh Babu, Mr. Supreet, Madam Suma, and Madam Milana, Madam Asha, Shiv Kumar, and two important persons with whom I had very close interaction every day. One is Dr. Umesh. I think I've troubled him too much in the past 2 days, and he has, tolerated me. And it was wonderful, Dr. Umesh, for working with you and for all your support. And also Dr. Ramesh, who was very much instrumental in creating the WhatsApp group and in producing the webinar, the brochure of this webinar, and also the e-certificates. Ramesh is unfortunately not here. I also thank him for all the support. I also thank the young poet Raveen here, who is also part of this webinar for the past 2 days, very religiously attending all sessions, making it very successful. I take this opportunity to thank my colleagues, Professor Chandrakiran, who sat through all the sessions on both the days, Professor R.L. Jagdish, Dr. Vanmala, Professor Rudramani, Dr. Krishna Manavalli, Professor Sujata C., who was here, and all the colleagues of the PG Center Mandya, PG Center Hassan, and the Postgraduate Center at Manasa Gangotri for making this event a very successful one. I also thank the print and the visual media for giving very wide coverage to this event and making people accessible to us, as well as we getting accessible to them. I'm very happy to state that more than 200 participants have joined this event virtually online. And I take this opportunity to thank each one of you. Please mark my words, each one of you, for joining us and making every session a very interesting one through your interactions, either asking questions directly to the resource persons or posting your comments on the box, and making this event a very fruitful and an interactive one. So with these words, if I have left anybody here who has worked directly or indirectly for the success of this conference, I actually If I've left out anybody, please don't feel bad, because you are in our hearts, you are in our minds. We can't forget you that easily. So thank you, everybody, for this wonderful, participation in this webinar, and I hope we can meet in the near future with such events. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Because of this COVID-19 pandemic, I have one special request. Please stay safe and stay healthy and take care of yourself. Thank you so much. We can have the national anthem. So if people are virtually online, I request each one of you to stand for the national anthem. Link up there. Connect ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅದು.
ಮಿಲನ್ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಮಿಲನ್ ನೋಡಿ. ನೋಡಿ ಇದು ಈ ಸೌಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರೂಮೆಂಟ್ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ. ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ಬೇಕು ನೋಡಿ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ. ನಾನು ಅದೇ ವೆಬ್ಸೈಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಓಕೆ ಅನಾಥ
ಓಕೆ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಬಿಸಿಗೆ
ಇದು ತಗೊಬಿಡಿ. ಇದು
ಬಿಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಬಿಡಿ. ಸರಿ ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ತಗೋಬೋದು ಈಗ? ಗಾಂಧಿ ಬಂಕ್ ಹೋಗಿ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹಾಂ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಬಿಡಿ ಸರ್. ಗಾಂಧಿ ಬಂಕ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡಿ. ಈ ಫೋಟೋ ಇಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಗಾಡಿ ದೊಡ್ಡದಿರುತ್ತೆ.
ಇದು ಬಿಲ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ ಲೇಬರ್